It is now August and all of July's sales activity for Contra Costa County has finalized and been uploaded, and in this video, I want to break it all down for you. One of the things that confuses people about the market is that they're reading headlines on the news and on the internet about what's happening at the national level, but real estate is hyper-local, and this video will help you understand what is happening specifically across important cities throughout Contra Costa County. One of the main benefits of really having a deep local understanding of market data is that you'll learn that even cities that are not too far apart, for example, the city of Brentwood and the city of Pittsburgh, which are about 20 minutes apart, are actually behaving completely different in the same real estate market. Now, before we begin, do me a huge favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. That way I know you like this content, and when I release more, you'll be the first to know when it comes out. Okay, well, let's start diving into the data city by city. 5 major cities here in Contra Costa County. Let's start understanding what is happening in each individual city as it relates to data that ended July of 2023. So let me minimize myself so I take up less of the screen. There we go. All right, so starting with the city of Concord. And Concord, for those of you who don't know, this is where I live, and so I have a very close pulse on what's happening here in the market in Concord. And so for July, again, we'll begin with the median sales price. The median sales price was $835,000 here in the city of Concord. That was a decline, actually. So we'll notice that there was a $19,000 decline from the month of June, just 1 month before. And if we look at what happened in May, median home prices back then were $840,000. So we saw this interesting behavior where May was at $840,000, and then we saw a spike up to $854,000. Then we came back down in July to $835,000, representing a $19,000 decline. One of the things that I like to keep an eye out on is what is happening year over year, especially when you consider the impact that interest rates are having on prices. And it's really not as bad as most people would imagine. You know, a year ago, interest rates were at approximately 4.5%, and today we're closer to 7%. So that makes a dramatic impact on people's affordability. But when we look at the median price of a home in the city of Concord in July of 2022, just a year ago, it was $860,000. So has it come down? Yes. By how much? Well, that's over here, a $25,000 year-over-year decline. But again, you know, you have the situation where affordability is more difficult for a lot of families, but the homes that are on the market, and we're definitely seeing less listings on the market this year, the homes that are coming on the market, the prices are holding pretty steady overall because inventory is so tight. The other things that I like to look at when understanding a market are things like the sales price to list price ratio. And what that means is we're looking at, well, how much was a home listed for, but how much did it actually sell for, which for me is a good understanding of how competitive the market is at any given point in time. The other thing that I like to look at, just for the sake of context before we go through further slides, is days on market. So if we are in a market where things move relatively quickly, then buyers and sellers need to have that understanding, versus there's other parts of the Bay Area, for example, Discovery Bay, which many would consider more on the outlier of the Bay Area, but still considered part of the Bay Area. That is just generally a slower market. So things typically don't move as fast as other cities. And so if we are looking at this data here for the city of Concord, we look at what happened in July. July was pretty mellow. So 1% difference between the sales price and the list price. So if somebody listed a home on average for, let's say, $750,000, there's a very, very small further increase in price that you have to offer to actually win your offer. Versus we look at what happened in June, so just a month ago. The typical difference, this is an average across the city, the difference between the list price and the sales price was approximately $54,000 or 7%, which indicates that it may have been a little bit more competitive in that particular month. When we go a month back, that difference was 5%. And so we're noticing this decline. Things were at 5% above list price, and then they spiked up a little bit to 7%. And last month, things really cooled down, and there was only a 1% difference between the list price and the final sales price of a home. Well, what was happening in July of last year? Well, last year, that standard difference was about 3% or $25,000. So in general, this part of the Bay Area is not incredibly aggressive versus if I were to highlight other cities like Berkeley, parts of San Francisco, parts of Oakland, San Jose, it is very common for people to have to bid 25, 30% above the list price in order to get their offer accepted. And that's really the value of understanding this local market data. In terms of how fast the market is moving, it's been really consistent. So for the last 3 months, July, June, and May, on average, it takes 8 days for a home to come on the market and then accept an offer and then go into escrow. So When you compare that against July of last year it was 12 months. So this indicates that things are moving a little bit quicker still than they were about a year ago. So again, it paints this picture that the inventory that is hitting the market is moving relatively quickly. Now, in terms of volume, we are seeing a decline in volume. So July of this year, there were 67 homes sold in the city of Concord. June was a busier month. We had 86 home sales in the city of Concord. And then May was 72. When you, again, one of the things that we as realtors are watching closely, and in order to set expectations for buyers and sellers in the current cycle of the market, is we had 25% less volume overall. So there is definitely less activity, and this changes in the Bay Area. And so again, you may be reading things that nationally home listings are down 50%, 40%, and it may confuse you. So understanding specifically what is happening in the area that you're looking to buy or sell becomes really, really beneficial. Alrighty, moving a little bit east to the city of Antioch, still one of the larger cities in Contra Costa County, and let's see what is happening there. So in July, which was last month, the median sales price in the city of Antioch was $637,000. The month previous, or June of this year, it was $650,000. So again, similar to Concord, this represents a decline. How much exactly? In Antioch, it's $13,000. And so we see a similar behavior in Antioch when compared to Concord. So in May, the median price was $645,000 for a single family home in the city of Antioch. In June, it went up a little bit by $5,000, and then we saw that again, that retraction in pricing in July. We're always looking at the year previous to see how the market was behaving back then, and similar story. So last year, the median sales price in Antioch was $650,000. This year, a lot to do with interest rates and where affordability is today. It's a little bit less, but really not so bad. So a 2% decline year over year, which when you consider what has happened to interest rates and how much they've gone up, this represents a pretty modest decline. So if you're thinking about selling, the situation is really not as bleak as you may be hearing in the nationally syndicated news sources like the television or the internet. Now, getting into, again, the second half of the data. So what is happening from a list price to final sales price perspective? So Antioch is consistently pretty mellow. So July of this year, you would have to, on average, bid 3% above the list price to get your offer accepted. In June, it was 4%. In May, it was 3%. So really, really consistent. And then when we look at what happened a year ago, July of 2022, it was, again, very mellow. So Antioch doesn't have the reputation or really the behavior of a city that you have to consistently bid way over list price in order to get your offer accepted. As far as the days on market, very, very consistent, very reminiscent of Concord, a little bit slower. Concord, if you remember, was 8 days on market pretty consistently for the last 3 months. In Antioch, just a little bit slower, not by much. So as a whole, if you're a seller, you should expect that what normally happens in Antioch is when you list your home, it's going to take about 10 days to get your offer accepted. So if you don't get an offer 5 days in, don't freak out. But if you don't have an offer after 30 days, maybe time to reconsider your pricing strategy. A year ago, it was 16 days on market. So again, we're actually seeing this year's market move even faster than it was this same time a year ago. From a volume perspective, we're seeing an even bigger decline in the number of homes sold in Antioch. Last July of 2022, there were 98 homes that were sold, and this year there were only 63. That's one of the bigger declines that you're going to see in the area. So less activity, less volume happening. And if you look at what's happening in the last 3 months of this year, just a consistent month-over-month decline. So May, there were 95 homes sold. June, there were 82 homes sold. And July of last month, 63 homes sold. So the lowest of the quarter. Okay, so now we're shifting over to Walnut Creek. Completely different part of Contra Costa County, completely different demographic, price point, income levels, very different from Concord and Antioch. So let's see how Walnut Creek is behaving nowadays. So in July, the median price point of a single family home in Walnut Creek was $1.5 million exactly. In June, it was a little bit higher, it was $1,547,000, and then May $1,615,000. So we've seen this gradual month-over-month decline, which again, now we're seeing how Walnut Creek is behaving differently from a place like Concord and Antioch. So we're seeing these steady kind of month after month declines. So from May to June, we saw a decline of $68,000 in the median sales price, and then from June to July, we saw a decline of $42,000. Looking into where things were a year ago. So a year ago, the median median sales price of a home in Walnut Creek was approximately $1.7 million. And what we're seeing is that there is now a 9% year-over-year decline. And this is going to be one of the bigger declines that we're going to see as we go through the reporting in Contra Costa County. So again, emphasizing the importance of understanding how your specific city is behaving, regardless of what you're reading, on the news or on the internet, things like that. Moving on to the second half of the data for Walnut Creek, let's see what's happening from a list price to final sales price perspective. So pretty consistent across the board, and in line with what we're seeing in most of Contra Costa County. So in July of this year, you would have to, as an average, offer 5% above the list price in order to get your offer accepted, is what we're seeing there. In June, not too much of a difference, 6%. May of this year, 4%. So things are pretty consistent in that aspect in Walnut Creek. In terms of how fast the market is moving, even when you consider the price points in Walnut Creek, which are significantly higher and some of the highest that you'll see in the county as a whole, things are still moving at a pretty quick pace. So very, very consistent market behavior. You're not really seeing a lot of fluctuation. So in July, it took about 9 days to get your, once you're a seller, if you put your home on the market, as an average 9 days, you're going to get an offer accepted and go into escrow with a buyer. June was a little bit quicker, 7 days. And in May, it was again 9 days. So not a lot of fluctuation there. In terms of the number of homes being sold and the volume in Walnut Creek, unlike a place like Antioch, where we're seeing consistent, steady, significant declines in volume from a month-over-month perspective, you look at what's happening in Walnut Creek, and it's pretty consistent. So July of this year, 42 homes sold. June of this year, 50 homes sold. And in May, there were 45 homes sold in the city of Walnut Creek. When we compare that against what happened a year ago, there were 48. So just a 6-home difference between July of this year versus July of last year, indicating that, for me, when I look at this data and I live next to Walnut Creek and I understand how desirable it is, you are seeing people are not able to afford as much, mostly due to interest rates, but everything else besides that is very, very consistent, indicating that Walnut Creek is still very much desirable when homes do hit the market. Okay, now we're shifting to deep East Contra Costa County. This is the city of Brentwood. Very, very desirable place to live overall, but also very, distant from a place like Walnut Creek. And so let's see how things are panning out there. So in Brentwood, this is interesting. So the median sales price of a home in the city of Brentwood for July of this year was $880,000. So one of the things that stands out to me as we're looking through this data is that in July of last year, the median sales price there was $850,000. So this is interesting, right? This is the first city that we're looking at where we actually have a year-over-year increase in the median sales price of a home. And so, again, just reflective, I think, of how desirable the city is, and the values are still holding regardless of what's happening with interest rates. So July also happens to be the strongest month of the quarter, right? We saw cities like Antioch and Concord where we're seeing kind of that gradual decline in home values, and July was their lightest month of the quarter. But Brentwood's holding steady, and they had a really, really good July. So $880,000 was the median sales price of a home for July of this year, up by $68,000 versus June of this year, so just the month prior. And then in May, it was $820,000. So yes, we did see a very, very slight decline of just 1% going from May into June, and then we saw that spike back up to $880,000. And again, this is one of the few places where you're going to see a year-over-year appreciation, which in this case is 4%. So very, very strong market still for sellers in the city of Brentwood. Now, looking at list price to sales price, I will tell you, in looking at this data for the past couple of years, Brentwood is consistently consistent. So you don't really see spikes in the gap between what the list price is and the final sales price is. So you just don't see those wild fluctuations that you see in a lot of other cities. It comes up, it comes down. Brentwood is consistently consistent. So you're almost always near the list price, which is, again, just indicative to what is happening specifically in the city of Brentwood. The one interesting thing when I look at this data is that the days on market was actually pretty high in July. So things did take longer to get into escrow. But when they did, it still resulted in a very good situation for sellers because this is one of the cities where values is holding the strongest when you just look at what's happening month over month and year over year. So July was by far the slowest month of the quarter. 19 days is what it took to get into escrow. You look at June and May, it was just 9, and a year ago, this same month, it was 13. So a little unusual. We'll see what happens next month in Brentwood and see if things start moving a little bit faster. In terms of volume, they had a very light volume month, I will say that. So 49 homes were sold. That is down from 70 in June and 80 in May. So there's less and less inventory month after month, and that may be playing a really strong role as to why values are holding. Brentwood is known for a great quality of life, nice warm weather, great public school system, and so whatever is hitting the market, when it does, it's still going for about the price that a seller is listing for. And when you look at what happened a year ago, July of last year, there were 72 homes sold. So definitely seeing a decline in volume, but from a pricing perspective for sellers, you're still in a really good spot overall. And last but certainly not least, we're going to wrap up with the city of Richmond. And if you're not from the Bay Area, you're not intimately familiar with Bay Area geography, Contra Costa County, the way it is shaped, it goes east to west or west to east. And Richmond is definitely the furthest west on the map. Richmond has coastline, so it does touch the water, whereas Brentwood, you're about 50 minutes inland, if not maybe a little bit more with traffic. So definitely a different part of Contra Costa County, but it's still part of the county and one of the larger populated cities in the county. So for that reason, I still want to include it. And so let's dig into what is happening in the city of Richmond. So in July, the median price point for a home in Richmond was $715,000. When you look at month over month, there was a slight decline. So June was $735,000. That was a 3% or a $20,000 decline in the median sales price of a home there. And when we look at what happened in May, it was $609,000. So that's interesting. We saw a really, really big spike, probably the biggest out of any of the cities that we've looked at. From May to June, there was a 21% month over month increase. That is about as high as you're going to see it anywhere. And so if you're a seller and you are currently listing your home in the market, according to the data, you're probably in a better spot than you would have been 3-4 months ago. So that's good to know. And if you're a buyer, you need to be aware of what's happening as well. If we look at year over year, Richmond is one of those cities that has appreciated the most anywhere. So when you look at when you consider the 5 cities that we've just reviewed, this city officially has the highest year over year appreciation at 10%, which bodes well for home sellers in the city of Richmond. So last year in July, the median sales price was $650,000, and this year in July was $715,000. So lots of good things happening in the city of Richmond, and you're starting to see that reflected in their home values. Switching over to the other set of data, let's see how competitive Richmond is. So interesting kind of mix of signals here. So for one, when we look at the sales price to list price ratio, we're seeing that this is probably right now one of the more competitive cities within Contra Costa County as far as how much you have to go above the list price to get your offer accepted as an average. And so in July, 10% was the average difference between what a home was listed for and what it eventually sold for. That's a difference of $65,000 across the board. In June, it was even a little bit more. So it was 13% or $86,000 versus May. May was pretty mellow. So just a 2% difference. And in July of last year, whatever you listed your home for, that was about the price that you were going to get. So multiple signals are telling us that Richmond is starting to appreciate at a rate that is faster than other cities in the Bay Area. However, things don't move super fast here. So if you look at the days on market, 2 weeks is about the norm. What you should expect as a seller for from the time you list your home to the time you actually get an offer, it's going to be about 2 weeks. So you may be looking at other cities, right? And you may be reading things that real estate's moving super duper fast and you're getting offers in 5-8 days. That as a whole is not the situation in Richmond. So you just need to be aware of that. Lastly, looking at the volume and the number of homes being sold in the city of Richmond, things are pretty steady. Really, the one outlier was June of this year. So July, this past month, there were 57 homes sold. June of this year, there were 40. In May of this year, there were 52. And last year, in July, there were 61. So we're not really seeing a big decline in the amount of homes being sold in the city of Richmond. The one outlier is going to be June. So we'll see how months like August and September pan out to see if, again, June might have been just a one-off. So that does it for our month of July real estate market recap for Contra Costa County specifically. I hope you found this video useful. If you have any questions whatsoever around buying, selling, investing, please send me a message. Give me a call. I would be more than happy to help you. Stay safe. Have a great day.